The Grand Galactic Council chamber was never quiet. It was a place of constant voices, glowing screens, floating data, and powerful beings arguing about borders, trade, and war. The chamber itself was massive. Its walls were made of clear crystal that showed the endless stars outside. In the distance, fleets of warships waited like silent guards. But today, something was different. Today, the chamber was silent. At the very center of the room stood one human, Ambassador Elias Ward. He looked small compared to the tall alien leaders around him. Some were twice his height. Some had glowing skin. Some had metal limbs. Others had eyes that shined like blue fire. But Elias Ward stood calm. His hands were behind his back. His face showed no fear. Above him floated a large holographic document, the Galactic Treaty of Unity. The treaty was simple. If humanity signed it, they would gain protection from the strongest empires in the galaxy. They would receive advanced technology. They would have access to new trade routes and shared resources. In return, humans had to agree to limits. Limits on their military. Limits on their expansion. Limits on their research. Limits on their future. To the Council, it was fair.
To them, this was peace.
The High Chancellor of the Council leaned forward from his glowing seat. His long silver robes flowed around him like mist. Ambassador Ward, he said in a deep and steady voice, humanity has been offered honor and safety. Do you accept the Treaty of Unity? Every camera in the chamber turned toward the human. Across thousands of star systems, billions watched the live broadcast. On Earth, cities stopped moving. Traffic froze. Factories paused. Even children in schools watched in silence. Humanity stood at a turning point. Elias Ward slowly looked around the chamber. He saw leaders who ruled hundreds of worlds. He saw species that had existed for millions of years. He saw power. But he also saw something else. Control. The silence grew heavier. Finally, he spoke.
No.
The word was not loud. It was not angry. But it hit the chamber like an explosion. The silence shattered. Alien leaders began shouting at once. Some stood up from their seats. Others demanded explanations. Military commanders whispered into communication devices. The High Chancellor raised his hand, trying to restore order. Ambassador Ward, he said sharply, perhaps you do not understand the offer. This treaty ensures your survival. Elias did not move. We understand it very well, he replied calmly. The holographic document shifted, showing the treaty terms in detail. No independent fleet growth without approval. No colonization beyond approved sectors. No development of weapons above agreed limits. All research data must be shared with the Council. The High Chancellor spoke again. These rules are necessary for galactic stability. Elias looked directly at him. Stability for who? He asked. The question caused another wave of whispers. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. For everyone. Elias slowly shook his head. For those already in power, he said quietly. Outside the chamber windows, something changed. Human ships in orbit began powering up. At first, it was small. Just energy signals rising. Then more signals appeared. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Council scanners detected new ships that had not been registered before. Massive vessels hidden in deep space. Warships unlike any design the galaxy had seen. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the human fleet activated full power. Military officers inside the Council began receiving urgent reports. Unknown human vessels detected. Energy levels rising rapidly. New defense platforms appearing. The High Chancellor turned back to Elias. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. Elias remained calm. Preparation, he answered. For war? The Chancellor asked. For independence, Elias corrected. Across the galaxy, panic began to spread. Markets crashed within minutes. Smaller species began sending emergency messages to the Council. Some feared humanity was about to declare war on everyone. But Earth remained quiet. There were no victory celebrations. No war speeches. Only silence. The High Chancellor tried once more. Ambassador Ward, do you understand what refusal means? Without this treaty, humanity stands alone. Elias gave a small nod. Yes. And you accept that risk? Elias looked toward the stars outside the chamber. Human ships now formed a perfect defensive ring around the system. Yes, he said again. The chamber became quiet once more. But this silence was different. It was not calm. It was fear. Because for the first time in galactic history, a young species had refused protection. No one had ever done that before. Young civilizations always accepted the treaty. They always agreed to limits. They always chose safety. Humanity had chosen something else. Freedom. The High Chancellor spoke slowly. Then humanity rejects the Treaty of Unity. Elias took one step forward. Yes. And humanity will not reconsider?
No.
The final word echoed across the chamber. In that moment, something shifted in the galaxy. The Council realized they did not fully understand humans. They were not reckless. They were not emotional. They were prepared. Prepared for something bigger. Prepared for something the Council could not see. As the broadcast ended, one final message was transmitted from the human fleet to every Council ship in orbit. It was simple. Humanity seeks peace. But humanity will never accept chains. Then the transmission ended. And across the stars, leaders began to ask the same question. If humans were not afraid to stand alone, what were they preparing for?
And why?
The galaxy had offered them safety. Humanity had answered with silence. And that silence shook the stars. The galaxy did not sleep after humanity's refusal. In the hours following the Council broadcast, panic spread faster than any war fleet ever could. News channels across thousands of worlds replayed the same moment again and again, the human ambassador saying no. Markets collapsed first. Trade systems that depended on human industry froze. Shipping lanes shut down. Insurance networks raised emergency alerts. The galaxy had expected humans to accept control. They had expected obedience. They were wrong. Inside the Grand Galactic Council chamber, emergency meetings continued without pause. Alien leaders argued loudly, their voices echoing against the crystal walls. This is madness, one leader shouted. They are a young species. They do not understand what they are refusing. Another slammed a clawed hand against the table. They understand very well. That is the problem. Military commanders stood near the walls, reading live reports. Human fleets were not attacking.
They were not advancing.
They were holding position. Perfect formation. Perfect discipline. That made it worse. The High Chancellor watched the holographic star map carefully. New symbols kept appearing near human space. Shipyards. Defense stations. Deep space listening posts. All hidden until now. Why were we not informed of these constructions? The Chancellor asked sharply. A data officer replied in a shaking voice. They were built within human borders. No treaty required disclosure. The Chancellor's face darkened. Humanity had followed every rule, until the moment the rules were meant to limit them. Far away on Earth, the mood was calm. There were no riots, no panic, no cheering crowds. Human leaders gathered inside a secure underground council room. Screens showed alien reactions, fleet movements, and economic data. President Mara Solis stood at the center of the room. They are scared, one advisor said. They did not expect this.
They never do, another replied.
President Solis looked at the human ambassador's message that had just arrived. One sentence. We did what we had to do. She nodded slowly. Humanity had debated this moment for decades. They had studied galactic history in secret. Every species that joined the Council followed the same path. First came protection. Then came limits. Then came dependence. When threats appeared, the Council protected its core worlds first. Outer species were sacrificed. Humanity had found proof. Ancient records discovered near the edge of known space. Ruins of a species that once trusted the Council fully. That species had signed every treaty. They had shared every weapon design. They had limited their fleets. When an unknown enemy came from beyond the galaxy, the Council could not respond fast enough. That species was erased. Humanity had learned the lesson written in the stars. Never place your survival in another's hands. Back at the Council, fear began turning into anger. They think themselves special, one elder said. We should remind them of their place. A military commander stepped forward. We could blockade their systems, cut off trade, force them to comply. Another commander shook his head. Our fleets are strong, but human defenses are unusual. Unusual how? The Chancellor asked. The commander hesitated. They are layered, redundant, designed to survive even if the Council itself attacked. The room grew quiet. Someone finally said what everyone was thinking. They plan for us. At that moment, an alert sounded. A border incident. A powerful empire known for enforcing Council decisions had moved a patrol fleet near a human colony world. Not an invasion. A threat. A message. The fleet stopped just outside the system's edge. Their commander sent a transmission. This space is under Council observation. Human forces are advised to stand down. The human response came quickly. No threats. No speeches. Only coordinates. Seconds later, a massive human structure emerged from deep space near the colony. It was enormous. Larger than a battleship.
Silent.
Weapons powered but not aimed. The alien fleet commander stared at the display in disbelief. That station was not there before, he said. Human transmission followed. Turn back. The alien commander hesitated. This was supposed to be simple. A show of power. Instead, he felt watched. Surrounded. He ordered a warning shot toward empty space. The human station responded instantly. One controlled energy pulse fired toward a nearby uninhabited moon. The beam struck with perfect accuracy. The moon cracked, split cleanly in two. No explosion. No chaos. Just precision. The message was clear. The alien fleet retreated, without another word. The news spread across the galaxy in minutes. Human defenses were not aggressive. They were confident. Back at the Council, panic deepened. They did not fire on the fleet, one leader whispered. They showed restraint. That is worse, another replied. It means they are not afraid. Smaller species began questioning their own treaties. Private messages flooded Council networks. If humans can refuse, why can't we? The balance of power was shifting.
Slowly.
Quietly. And humanity had not fired a single shot in anger. President Solis watched the reports from Earth. So it begins, she said softly. Humanity had not rejected peace. They had rejected control. And the galaxy was starting to understand the difference. As alien leaders looked at their restricted fleets and outdated weapons, one terrifying thought spread through their minds. If this was humanity while holding back, what would they look like when truly threatened? The question echoed across the stars. And no one liked the answer forming in their thoughts. The galaxy had seen powerful weapons before. It had seen wars that burned entire systems. It had seen empires rise and fall. But it had never seen a young species move with such quiet confidence. After the border incident, the Council expected humanity to celebrate. They expected speeches.
Pride. Threats.
Instead, humanity did nothing. Their fleets remained still. Their colonies continued daily life. Trade routes reopened slowly, but only on human terms. This silence was worse than aggression, because silence meant control. Inside the Grand Galactic Council chamber, tension filled the air like a coming storm. The High Chancellor stood before a massive holographic map of known space. Red markers showed fleet movements from nervous empires. Yellow markers showed systems requesting emergency protection. Blue markers showed human space. Perfectly organized. Perfectly defended.
Growing.
They are expanding, one council member said quietly. Within their legal borders, another answered. The Chancellor looked at new data reports. Human ship production had doubled in the last 5 years. New energy readings showed weapons research far beyond what they had shared with the Council. How did we not see this? Someone asked. A data analyst responded with fear in their voice. They did not hide it. We just assumed they would eventually sign. That was the mistake. The galaxy had underestimated humanity because they were new. But humans had not underestimated the galaxy. Far from the Council core worlds, deep inside human territory, something moved. Hidden shipyards near gas giants worked without rest. Massive structures were being assembled piece by piece. Not warships. Something larger. Something unknown. Admiral Runishita stood on the command deck of Earth's primary defense carrier. She studied reports carefully. Council fleets are repositioning, her officer said. Let them, she replied calmly. Do you think they will attack? She shook her head.
No.
They are afraid of what they do not understand. The officer hesitated. And if they try? Admiral Ishita's eyes remained steady. Then we show them only enough. Back at the council, an emergency session was called. New information had arrived. A long-range probe from an outer empire had detected strange activity near the edge of human-controlled space. Massive energy signatures. Unusual gravitational distortions. The council demanded answers from humanity. This time, Ambassador Elias Ward appeared again before the chamber. His face was calm as always. Explain these readings, the Chancellor ordered. Elias glanced at the data projection. Defensive infrastructure, he answered. Against who? The Chancellor asked sharply. Elias paused. Against anyone. The chamber erupted again. You are destabilizing the galaxy, one leader shouted. No. Elias replied quietly. We are stabilizing our future. Another leader leaned forward. You speak of independence, but your actions look like preparation for domination. Elias did not react. If we wanted domination, he said slowly, we would not be having this conversation. The room fell quiet again. His words were not a threat. They were a statement. Then something unexpected happened. A signal interrupted the meeting. An emergency transmission from a distant border system. An unknown object had appeared beyond mapped space. Not human. Not council. Not recognized. The holographic map shifted. At the far edge of the galaxy, near dark unexplored regions, a new red mark blinked. Then 3. Then 12. Large objects. Moving slowly. Silent. The council officers rushed to scan the objects. No response. No communication. Their energy signatures were strange. Not like any known technology. The room filled with nervous whispers. Is this human? Someone asked. The Chancellor turned sharply toward Elias. Elias looked genuinely confused. No, he said firmly. The Chancellor studied his face. For the first time since humanity refused the treaty, Elias looked concerned. That alone was enough to spread fear. Reports began flooding in. A small mining colony near the outer rim had gone dark. No distress call. No debris. Just silence. Council fleets were dispatched immediately. But they were limited. Limited by treaty. Limited by shared weapon agreements. Limited by the very system meant to create peace. The council leaders looked at one another. And then, slowly, their eyes turned toward the human ambassador. Elias understood what they were thinking. You believe this is why we refused, the Chancellor said carefully. Elias did not answer immediately. Instead, he spoke slowly. Humanity studies patterns. History. Risks. You knew something, the Chancellor pressed. We prepared for possibilities, Elias replied. The truth was simple. Humans had long suspected that the galaxy was not as safe as it believed. Ancient signals had been detected years ago. Weak. Distant. Ignored by most empires. But not by humanity. They had not refused the treaty because they wanted power. They had refused because they did not want limits when the unknown arrived. And now, something unknown had arrived. As the emergency meeting ended, panic spread through council systems. Some empires blamed humanity. Others feared they had been right all along. Meanwhile, deep inside human space, massive hidden defense platforms began activating fully. Power levels rose. Weapons unlocked. Fleet commanders received encrypted orders. Admiral Ishida stood once again before her bridge window. Stars reflected in her eyes. Confirm outer rim sightings, she ordered. Confirmed, her officer replied. Unknown fleet approaching Council territory. She nodded slowly. Maintain position. Do not advance. Are we waiting? The officer asked. Yes. For what? Admiral Ishida's voice was calm. For the moment they understand why we said no. Far beyond the Council's protected worlds, the unknown fleet moved closer.
Silent.
Unstoppable. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy realized something terrifying. They were not prepared. But humanity was. And the silence that once caused panic was now beginning to look like foresight. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Because whatever was coming would test every choice the galaxy had made. And humanity's refusal was no longer rebellion. It was warning. The first world fell without a warning. It was a border system far from the Council's core worlds. A quiet place. Mining stations. Small cities. No heavy defenses. One moment, the system's star burned calmly. The next moment, all signals stopped. No distress call. No explosion. No escape pods. Just silence. Council long-range scanners confirmed the truth hours later. The planet still existed. But everything on it was gone. Cities flattened into smooth glass. Oceans boiled away. Satellites erased from orbit. The unknown fleet did not conquer. It erased. The report reached the Grand Galactic Council during an emergency session. When the images appeared in the air, the chamber froze. This cannot be real, one leader whispered. Another shouted, What weapon does this? The data officers had no answers. Energy readings showed power levels beyond any known scale. Not brute force. Not chaos. Precision.
Cold.
Efficient. Merciless. Council fleets rushed toward the destroyed system. Thousands of ships jumped into hyperspace. They arrived too late. The unknown fleet was already gone. No debris. No signals. No trail. Only fear. Panic spread across the galaxy like fire. Outer colonies began evacuating. Civilian ships clogged hyperspace lanes. Entire species abandoned border worlds and ran toward the Council's core. But the Council itself was trapped by its own rules. Fleet sizes were limited. Weapons were regulated. Experimental technology was forbidden. Every protection system had been designed for known threats. This was not known. Inside the Council chamber, voices turned desperate. We must lift treaty limits, one commander demanded. You cannot undo centuries of policy in one day, an elder replied. But we are blind and weak, another shouted. The High Chancellor said nothing. His eyes moved slowly to the blue markers on the star map. Human space. Still calm. Still organized. Still untouched. Meanwhile, inside human territory, preparations accelerated. Hidden defense stations moved into full readiness. Shipyards opened sealed sections. Fleets that had never been seen began to mobilize. Admiral Rinishita stood before a massive tactical display. Confirmed destruction pattern, an officer reported. No survivors. No resistance. Admiral Ishida closed her eyes for a moment. So it has begun, she said quietly. President Mara Solis watched the same data from Earth. We warned them, she whispered. Human leaders had hoped they were wrong. They were not. Another system fell 2 days later. This time it was closer to the Council core. A world protected by treaty fleets. Those fleets fought.
And vanished.
Recordings showed Council ships firing everything they had. The unknown enemy ignored it. Weapons passed through energy shields like they were not there. Ships were sliced apart by invisible force. The battle lasted 3 minutes. The system went dark. Markets collapsed completely. Entire governments fell within hours. Some species began surrendering to nothing, sending desperate messages into empty space. The Council chamber became a place of fear instead of power. For the first time in history, the High Chancellor stood and bowed his head.
We were wrong, he said.
The room fell silent. Our treaties created peace among ourselves, he continued. But they left us unready for what lies beyond. Slowly, his gaze turned to the human ambassador's empty seat. Elias Ward was not present. He was already back in human space. A council envoy ship was launched immediately toward Earth. Not with demands. With humility. When the envoy arrived, human fleets escorted it calmly. No threats. No weapons aimed. Inside Earth's secure council chamber, the alien representatives stood before President Solis. They looked tired, afraid,
Old.
"We request humanity's assistance," the High Chancellor said through the translator. "Not as subordinates. Not as controlled allies. But as equals." President Solis studied him carefully. "You refused our warnings," she said. "Yes," he replied honestly. "You tried to limit us." "Yes." She paused. "And now?" The Chancellor swallowed. "Now we ask for your strength." Silence filled the room. Finally she spoke. "Humanity will help." Relief spread across the alien delegation. "But," she continued, "not under Council command." The Chancellor nodded. "We understand." Human fleets began moving beyond their borders for the first time. Not to conquer. To defend. Massive warships emerged from deep space, larger than any Council vessel. Weapons systems powered up that no alien engineer could explain. Human commanders did not panic. They analyzed.
Adapted. Prepared.
Admiral Ishida addressed her fleet. "We do not fight for glory," she said. "We fight so others may live." As human ships entered the threatened regions, they encountered the unknown fleet at last. The enemy did not respond. It simply advanced. Human ships did not rush forward. They observed.
They tested.
Small controlled strikes were launched. New defense patterns activated. For the first time, the unknown enemy slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. Across the galaxy, hope flickered. The Council watched the battle feeds in disbelief. Human ships maneuvered unpredictably. They sacrificed no lives needlessly. They adapted after every exchange. They learned fast, one Council commander whispered. "They planned for this," another replied. The truth was becoming clear. Humanity had not refused treaties out of pride. They had refused because survival required freedom. And now, as stars burned and worlds fell, the galaxy understood too late. The unknown enemy had expected weakness. Instead, they found resistance. But the war had only begun. And the next battle would decide whether preparation was enough, or whether even humanity had underestimated what waited in the dark. The first human ship was destroyed on the 7th day of battle. Until then, humanity had moved like a wall, strong, steady, unbreakable. Their fleets had slowed the unknown enemy. They had saved 3 systems. They had evacuated millions. But now, the enemy had adapted. The destroyed ship was a heavy cruiser named Valiant Dawn. It had protected a refugee convoy moving away from a threatened world. The unknown fleet changed its attack pattern. Instead of direct energy strikes, they used focused gravitational waves. The cruiser's hull twisted. Metal bent like soft wire. The ship did not explode. It folded inward silently. Across human command channels, the loss was felt instantly. Admiral Ishida watched the feed without speaking. "Survivors?" she asked quietly. "None," the officer replied. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them again. Adjust shield frequency. Spread formation. No tight clusters. Human fleets responded immediately. They did not panic. They adapted. But the message was clear. The enemy was learning too. Across the galaxy, hope began to shake. Council fleets tried to support human forces, but their ships were slower, weaker, built under strict treaty limits. In one battle, a Council defense line collapsed within minutes. Human ships had to jump in and pull survivors out while fighting at the same time. The Council leaders watched in shame. For centuries, they had believed their system was strong. Now they saw its weakness. Limits had created peace. But they had also created fragility. Meanwhile, deep in human territory, something massive powered up. The hidden structures near gas giants, the ones even the Council had detected but never understood, were finally revealed. They were not shipyards. They were anchors. Space around them bent slightly as enormous platforms activated. Energy gathered in silence. President Mara Solis stood in the underground command center on Earth.
Phase 3, she ordered.
Around her, commanders exchanged serious looks. "Are we ready?" one asked. "We have no choice," she answered. Back on the front lines, Admiral Ishida faced the largest enemy formation yet. Dozens of unknown vessels moved in perfect formation toward a populated Council core world. If that world fell, panic would become collapse. Human fleets moved to intercept. The battle began with controlled strikes. Human rail cannons fired in perfect rhythm. Missiles curved through space using complex patterns. Several enemy ships were damaged, but more kept coming. Then the unknown fleet revealed something new. A central vessel, larger than the rest, darker. Space around it looked distorted. Human sensors struggled to read it. "That ship is coordinating the others," Ishida said. "It's their command." "Can we destroy it?" an officer asked. She hesitated. "Not with current output." Council ships nearby began to retreat under heavy fire. Civilian evacuation ships were still escaping the system. Time was running out. Ishida opened a secure channel to Earth. "We need it," she said simply. President Solis gave one small nod. Approved. Far away, the massive human space anchors released their stored energy. A deep vibration moved through nearby space. From hidden locations across human territory, a weapon unlike anything seen before activated. Not a missile, not a beam, a focused compression of space itself. Back at the battlefield, human ships adjusted their formation suddenly. They pulled back. The unknown fleet advanced, sensing weakness. Then it happened. A narrow line of distorted space opened directly in front of the enemy command vessel. For a brief second, nothing moved. Then space snapped back into place. The central enemy ship vanished. Not exploded, not shattered.
Gone.
The remaining enemy vessels lost coordination instantly. Their movements became slower, less precise. Human fleets attacked immediately. For the first time since the war began, the unknown fleet retreated. Across the galaxy, stunned silence followed. Council chambers erupted in disbelief. "What did they just use?" one leader whispered. "Something not restricted by treaty," another replied quietly. But the victory was not complete. Reports came in quickly. The massive human weapon had drained enormous energy reserves. It could not be used often. And deeper scans showed something terrifying. The fleet they destroyed was only an advance force. Behind it, far beyond mapped space, more signals were rising. Much larger, much stronger. Admiral Ishida studied the data. "This was a scout," she said. President Solis received the same information. "How long?" she asked. "Days," the analyst replied. "Maybe less." The galaxy had celebrated too early. The real storm was still coming. Council leaders sent another urgent message to Earth. "We will remove all treaty limits," the High Chancellor declared publicly. Effective immediately. It was the end of centuries of controlled balance. Species began rearming at once. Shipyards activated forbidden designs. Research labs reopened dangerous projects. But most knew the truth. They were too late to match humanity. The only reason they still stood was because humans had refused change before the storm arrived. As evacuation fleets cleared the last threatened system, Admiral Ishida stood quietly on her bridge. Stars reflected across the glass. "Prepare all fleets for full engagement," she ordered. "Against how many?" her officer asked. She looked toward the dark edge of the galaxy. "As many as come." The next signals appeared on long-range scanners. Hundreds, then thousands. The unknown armada was entering the galaxy fully now. Bigger than anything seen before. Stronger than the first wave. And moving directly toward the heart of civilization. This would not be a border fight. This would be survival. And as the galaxy braced for impact, one truth echoed through every world. If humanity had signed the treaty, If they had limited their growth, if they had trusted safety over freedom, there would be no defense left at all. The final battle was coming, and this time, even humanity would be pushed to the edge. The final armada entered the galaxy like a shadow swallowing light. Long-range scanners failed to count every ship. The numbers were too high. The unknown enemy moved in perfect silence, their formations stretching across entire star systems. This was not a raid. This was extermination. Across the galaxy, emergency alarms rang nonstop. Civilizations that once believed themselves eternal now faced a simple truth. They would survive, or they would disappear. At the center of human command, President Mara Solis stood before a live projection of the incoming armada. Hundreds of alien leaders watched beside her through secure channels. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was not leading. They were listening. Admiral Rinishida's voice came through calmly from the front lines. All human fleets in position. Defense grid fully active. Behind her ships, something extraordinary stretched across space. The hidden anchors had linked together. Massive human defense platforms formed a layered wall across the main entry corridor into the galaxy. Not a single thin line, but multiple overlapping shields, weapon arrays, and gravitational fields. Human engineers had designed it for one purpose: hold the line. Council fleets gathered behind the human formation. Their ships were smaller, but now free from treaty limits. They carried experimental weapons never before used. Still, everyone understood. Without humanity's preparation, this defense would not exist. The unknown armada did not slow. It advanced directly toward the human wall. Admiral Ishida gave the order. Fire. The first volley lit space like a second sunrise. Human rail cannons thundered. Energy beams sliced forward. Gravitational pulses distorted the enemy's front ranks. Several hostile ships shattered instantly. But thousands more moved through the debris. They responded with coordinated force. Entire sections of the human shield grid trembled. One defense platform overloaded and exploded in silence. Council ships panicked for a moment. Human ships did not. Maintain formation, Ishida ordered. The battle became chaos. Stars were hidden behind weapons fire. Shockwaves rippled across space. Debris fields grew thicker every minute. Human fleets rotated constantly. Damaged ships fell back. Fresh ships replaced them. Automated repair drones moved without pause. The unknown enemy pushed harder. Their weapons adapted again, cutting through two outer defense layers. The armada began breaking through. President Solis watched as red warning signals filled the display. How long can we hold? The High Chancellor asked. She did not answer. On the front line, Admiral Ishida faced a hard decision. Activate the final measure, she said quietly. Her officers froze. That will drain everything, one warned. I know. Deep inside human territory, the remaining space anchors began to glow. They were never meant to fire together. But humanity had built them without restriction, without permission, without chains. Energy flowed across vast distances through quantum-linked relays. On the battlefield, a massive field formed in front of the advancing armada. Not an explosion, not a beam, a compression barrier. The enemy ships slammed into it at full speed. For the first time, they stopped. Thousands of hostile vessels were crushed against distorted space. Some folded inward. Others lost power entirely. Human fleets surged forward. Council ships followed. Side by side, the battle turned. But victory came at a cost. Several human capital ships were lost holding the barrier steady. Entire crews gave their lives to maintain energy flow. Admiral Ishida's flagship shook violently as enemy fire struck its hull. Admiral, we cannot hold this much longer, an officer shouted. She looked at the energy readings. If the barrier collapsed too early, the armada would break through and reach the core worlds. If it stayed active too long, every anchor would burn out. There would be no second defense. She opened a channel to every fleet. This is Admiral Ishida, she said calmly. All ships, prepare for final advance. Council commanders stared in shock. Final advance? Human fleets accelerated together, straight toward the stalled armada. The barrier dropped at the exact moment of impact. Human ships flew directly into enemy formations at close range. Rail cannons fired at point-blank distance. Boarding drones attached to hostile hulls. Experimental weapons were used without hesitation. Council ships followed the human charge. For the first time, the unknown enemy began to scatter. They had not expected resistance that strong. They had not expected sacrifice. They had not expected unity. The central command vessels of the Armada attempted to retreat. Admiral Ishida saw the movement. "Target their core signal relays," she ordered. Human intelligence ships had discovered a weakness during earlier battles. The Armada depended on synchronized communication. Destroy the relay hubs. Break the mind. A coordinated strike hit the largest relay ship. It exploded in a silent flash. Across the battlefield, enemy formations faltered. Ships drifted out of alignment. Some turned away entirely. The Armada began retreating toward dark space. Human fleets did not chase far. They held position, watched, waited. Minutes passed, then hours. The scanners confirmed it. The enemy was leaving the galaxy. Cheers erupted across countless worlds. Council leaders collapsed into their seats in relief. President Solis closed her eyes briefly. It was over.
For now.
The battlefield was filled with wreckage. Human and alien ships floated damaged but alive. Rescue teams moved quickly. The cost had been heavy, but existence remained. Days later, the Grand Galactic Council chamber filled once more. This time, the mood was different. Not anger, not fear, respect. Ambassador Elias Ward stood again at the center. The High Chancellor rose from his seat and bowed deeply. "Humanity saved us," he said openly. "You refused our limits. You prepared when we would not. Because of you, we still stand." The chamber remained silent. Elias spoke calmly. "Humanity did not prepare to rule you. We prepared to survive. And survival cannot depend on permission." The Chancellor nodded. "The treaties will be rewritten." Elias gave a small smile. "Then write them with freedom in mind." Outside the crystal walls, fleets from many species floated together peacefully. Not controlled, not limited, all stronger now. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Peace without strength is fragile. Safety without freedom is temporary. And humanity? Humanity would always choose to stand unchained. Because when the darkness came, it was not treaties that saved the stars. It was preparation. It was courage. It was humanity.